Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video I'm going to be showcasing the battles that helped me become one of the first battlers in the entire world to reach veteran rank in the Might and Mastery season of Go Battle League. Now the team is a slight alteration from a previous team that I've had great success with in the Ultra League. Shadow Golurk, Shadow Drapion, and Miltank. But this time I have benched Miltank in exchange for the new rollout user on the block, BLASTOISE, and honestly, the rank 1 BLASTOISE put in an immense amount of work. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and take a look at the team in action. We're off to a tough start in game number 1, Shadow Golurk into Shadow Lapras. This is a losing matchup, so I'm going to bank a Shadow Punch and save switch to the Shadow Drapion. Energy on Golurk is always valuable, so in bad matchups, especially if they don't have fast move pressure, being able to bank energy and then pivot out is quite nice. They throw a Sparkling Aria onto the Drapion, which is great. I'd much rather tank it there. They send in Zygarde, and a bit of good luck goes my way as I get a Crunch debuff. Unfortunately, I'm not actually going to make it to a third Crunch. I'm only going to make it to an Aqua Tail. But my opponent decides not to take that damage. An Aqua Tail would not have knocked out there. So in my view, a small misplay there by my opponent. They go for a Crunch, and now I send in Golurk. Unfortunately, I do get one turn bring and lag there, so I'm not able to sneak through the Mud Slap that I should. And that allows my opponent to actually save the Zygarde and send in Lapras. Lapras will immediately be met with a Dynamic Punch, and now rank 1 Blastoise hits the field. I've had this since catching it in 2021, waiting for its time to shine, and boy, I am very happy that Blastoise finally has play. Blastoise is going to be hit with Sparkling Aria after Sparkling Aria, Blastoise farming up, but I miscounted, and that's going to let my opponent make one final Sparkling Aria. The good news is, it's the rank 1 Blastoise, so it's not going to KO. They're going to make a catch onto the Zygarde that unfortunately they were able to save due to that one turn bring and lag. In comes Lapras, but the rank 1 Blastoise gets the double up on Hydro Cannons. In the back is a Corviknight, and this game is over. As Corviknight in the Ultra League, when I tried it, I did not care for it. I didn't think it was very good, and I'm going to demonstrate why. Watch a Mud Slap user absolutely bully this flying type. Golurk just a pacing, dramatically outspeeding this Corviknight. Corviknight gonna shield up the Shadow Punch. They can fire off a last second charge attack, but I now have the energy for a Shadow Punch. So Shadow Golurk, the energy we stored at the beginning of the match, coming in clutch as we KO the Corviknight and we take a game 1 win. Moving to the next match, Shadow Golurk versus Zygarde. Not a good matchup for the Golurk. In this matchup, ideally, I'm going to try and land a Dynamic Punch and then eventually try and catch a Crunch onto the Shadow Drapion. Dynamic Punch does do more damage, so landing it is quite nice, and I get my catch onto the Drapion. This is incredibly important. But my opponent went for an Outrage. That's actually not great for me. But the good news is, since I've already done a ton of damage with the Golurk, they're now in Crunch range. So I can go for the Crunch, that's going to knock them out, and now they're going to send out Golisopod. Golisopod could potentially win CMP over Drapion if they decided to throw instantly, but instead they're going to play for a massive amount of energy. They throw right when I get my Aqua Tail, so they're not going to even let me land that. Aqua Jet will pick up the KO, and now Blastoise hits the field. Blastoise very comfortable tanking a lot of moves. Opponent going to be firing off X's, or in the back is Fortress, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to bring back Golurk. XL Fortress is everywhere in high elo Ultra League, and unfortunately for them, their Volt Switches are going to be healing this Golurk, which of course has that double resist. Opponent now does get the debuff. A bit of awkward timing there from me. I wanted to build up to a Dynamic Punch, but of course that does give them 2 free turns. And now my opponent is going to fire off another move. Their play is to try and catch me in a Mud Slap and snipe down, so I just switch into the Blastoise as they switch into Golisopod, and doing so just instantly wins the game, and the opponent will resign the match. Great lead in the next match, leading into Weezing, save switch into the Malamar, 3 Mud Slaps and a switch to Shadow Drapion. Shadow Drapion is going to do great against Malamar. Malamar is going to go for foul play because they can't afford to debuff themselves just yet. I get to farm up to a Crunch plus an Aqua Tail, and I'm looking to put some pressure onto my opponent. The Crunch is going to land, getting that defense drop, and an Aqua Tail, even without the defense drop, would very easily KO here. That's going to force my opponent to actually end up committing a shield. I decide to let this go. They are going to go for a superpower. That's going to get me very, very low, but I can survive it, and now I will commit the shield. So they're very heavily debuffed. They actually pivot out into the Weezing, and now Weezing's going to be met with the Shadow Punch, Mud Slaps as well, hitting for massive super effective damage onto the Weezing. And one nice thing is a lot of the Weezings in Ultra League are now running a nuke move instead of Brutal Swing. And if they don't have Brutal Swing, then Golurk with a shield is suddenly way better into Weezing. So there were a couple different meta factors that ended up making Golurk a very nice play today. Here, they're going to send in Pangoro, and this game is already over. They just don't know it yet. Dynamic Punch to get the shield, bank a bunch of energy, and send in Blastoise. If this was the older version of the team, I'd be in trouble because they get close combat, potentially farm down, but we have Blastoise on the field. They're forced to get rid of all of their energy, getting rid of this Blastoise, and then I can just bring in the Golurk. In comes the Malamar, that gets farmed down. Opponent is going to resign the match. Shadow Golurk versus Pangoro. This is a nice lead for the Golurk. I always prefer to be the Golurk here because as long as you have a decent IV Shadow Golurk, you can always tank a Night Slash. They're never going to be able to farm down. They throw on a little bit of awkward timing there. I was expecting a catch, that's why I didn't do one in the move. But as the Golurk, you can typically win the ones just straight Shadow Punch. Tank one, shield one, and then you get to fire off some Shadow Punches. Opponent now going to send out a Weezing, and if that's what they're bringing in, then their final Pokemon is going to be some Poison-type fast move. The reason being is you wouldn't really send a Weezing into a Mud Slapper unless you had something that had an equally bad matchup, but even less fast move pressure, and there it is. Hello, Drapion. So now Drapion is going to be hit with Aqua Tail after Aqua Tail after Aqua Tail in this matchup. This next Aqua Tail is going to apply quite a bit of pressure, getting them deep into their yellow health. And now, this next one is actually going to come down to a CMP tie. My opponent with the higher attack Drapion, but Drapion did its job. I was able to bait out their Drapion. Now I get to send in the Golurk. In comes the Weezing, and Weezing will immediately be Shadow Punched once again. And this Golurk just proving to be an absolute nuisance. Anytime you see a Pangoro plus Poison team, Shadow Golurk should be able to basically KO 2/3 of the team by itself. And in this battle, that was no exception. Another move fired off by this Weezing, but the rank 1 Blastoise does not care. Sludge is going to connect. Here I will go for a full undercharge because I'd love to leave them at 1 HP if possible. They end up shielding, switching to the Drapion, but Drapion does not have the residual energy needed to make a move, so I can fire off the Hydro Cannon, pick up the KO. Weezing does actually get one turn bring in here, but realistically, it's not going to impact the outcome of this game, as I would have been able to outpace anyway. So I get to fire off Hydro Cannon. Hydro Cannon KOs the Weezing, and we're able to move to 4-0 in this set. Now, 4-0 should be enough for Veteran, and that's good because Golisopod, not a great lead to see. I'm going to safe switch into the Shadow Drapion, and there, I was expecting them to catch, which is why I didn't throw instantly. I should have thrown the Crunch instantly. Getting the turn back there is genuinely very, very helpful, because now my opponent is always just going to be 2 turns ahead of me. So they will get to spam out Aqua Jets. I did get the debuff, which is quite nice. But Golisopod lead, the fact that they're staying in is definitely good for me, because once I neutralize this, the hope is that Golurk will have better play in the back. So they are getting KO'd. Out comes a Florges, and I was not expecting to see Florges on my screen in the Ultra League. Florges taking super effective damage from the Poison Stings, and these Aqua Tails are adding up quite a bit as well. So spamming out Aqua Tail after Aqua Tail, Florges not wanting to risk any more charge attacks reached by the Drapion is going to go for a Trailblaze. That's going to pick up the KO. I really just need Golurk to put in work in the back. If either Golurk or Blastoise is strong into what they have, being down 2 shields won't matter. It's a Jellicent in the back, and I think this will be a loss. Jellicent, this team is ABA weak to, but as long as you're not down 2 shields, it's very, very playable. But unfortunately, I'm down 2 shields, so this is going to be tough. They do end up double shielding. I'm going to send in the Blastoise just to absorb energy, but things are not looking great for me here. This is a rare team that was triple strong to Golurk, and they're actually triple weak to XL Fortress. So fair play to them. I guess they're winning the non-Fortress games, but this would be completely unplayable for them if they queued into a Fortress. So they are going to go for a Shadow Ball. I'm forced to Hydro to burn the clock, and now I don't think I can get enough damage onto this Jellicent because I can't land a second Mud Slap. Landing a second Mud Slap would win me the game, but the new Hex pacing too fast, and I made it as close as I could for being down 0 shields to 2, but my opponent is going to take the win. No 5-0 for me, but I will get to claim the 4-1 set, and we do get to reach veteran rank in this season. I do have some other selected battles as well, as I do get a nice pair of pants. Shadow Golurk into Virizion. This team is ABA weak, so how do you play out of Virizion? Well, you're going to have to get some predictions right. First of which, I predict they overfarm by 1 before they fire off their Leaf Blade, so I get a catch onto the Shadow Drapion. Shadow Drapion is walled here, but Shadow Drapion is going to be the best counter to Virizion on this team. Virizion goes for the Sacred Sword, and that's very okay. Because the thought process here is with Virizion out of the way, hopefully Golurk and Blastoise will have very good play into what my opponent has. They're staying in, they're really trying for alignment, but I really, if possible, I would love to take alignment, so I'm very comfortable committing a shield. If they shield back, I'm just going to let this go because this is low enough that I can Mud Slap down, but they are instead just going to send in a Shadow Drifblim. Unfortunately, I didn't make the crunch, but my opponent shields up an Aqua Tail, and now I send in Blastoise. Blastoise going to fire off the Hydro Cannon. There's a catch on a Jellicent. Okay, so we have 2 problem Pokemon on one team for the opponent, but this is where all the stored energy on the Golurk is incredible because Golurk gets the spam out Shadow Punches at this Jellicent. Jellicent tries for a CMP tie, but I have a better idea. Instead, I'm going for the full Mud Slap farm down, and now Golurk exits with so much loaded energy. Driplim lets it go. They get absolutely rocked by a Shadow Punch. Oh my goodness. They're gonna shield. In comes the Blastoise. The rollout goes through, and Shadow Ball, it's not gonna be enough to KO. Blastoise takes the rollout down, and despite 2 core breakers, we take the win. Shadow Golurk going up against Galarian Weezing, safe switch into a Shadow Dusknoir, and right off the bat, I've already made a misplay. I shouldn't have stayed in for that second Mud Slap with the Golurk because I just take too much damage. I should have brought in the Drapion instantly. Drapion can do very, very well here. I go for the bait because a lot of Dusknoirs, once you give them this energy advantage, will try and make a play for swap, and that can help me catch back up a little bit. But it's still going to be very, very uncomfortable regardless. So I will fire off a Crunch. Now that I have baited once, I'm able to get the final shield from my opponent and get a defense drop. And now I can commit the shield, and then I'm going to throw 2 in the move here. In hindsight, I could have overfarmed more, so that's definitely my fault. My opponent went for the Dynamic Punch, so they weren't close to a move, and we're going to begin to see these little errors start to add up more and more and more. Because I didn't overfarm enough, they get a perfect farm down, and Golurk has already taken 2 hexes of damage. So Golurk losing valuable HP, the Overheat connects, in the back is Golisopod, but if I still had health available, had I not taken that second hex, then I could potentially get to a move. But now I think I'm in 1 Fairy Wind range, which is really, really bad and means that I'm probably going to lose this game. So my opponent is going to end up actually trying to CMP tie there. They wait the turn, trying to CMP, but I'm able to get through a free fast move as a result. I will be able to pick up the KO with the Hydro Cannon as I can't quite get the farm down against the Golisopod. In comes the Weezing. This will not KO, and I'm going to have to get a catch. The opponent should be 2 off the move, so I can do 1 and catch, but they were 1 off. I'm not familiar with the residuals on Overheat and Sludge, and because I took that Hex earlier on, I died to 1 Fairy Wind. Such a winnable game, but unfortunately, I just made a lot of misplays. Well, we get a chance for redemption in the next match. Leading into Pangoro, they safe switch out into the Shadow Dusknoir, and this time I'm a lot faster. I'm able to land a Crunch, which is great news for me. I can tank a Dynamic Punch. They end up baiting with the Shadow Punch here. I'm going to try for a farm down, but they survive on 1 HP. They make the Dynamic Punch, and that's going to force my shield. So I'm now going to send in Pangoro, and Pangoro will immediately be met with an Aqua Tail. But I'm worried that this is a bait out of my Drapion. They end up throwing on alignment, so they give an entire free Mud Slap to the Golurk. They get a boost, and I'm going to be firing off Shadow Punch. Shadow Punch at Pangoro is going to pick up the knockout. In the back is Jellicent. Unfortunately, my opponent does get 1 turn bring and lag here. They end up no shielding, but even without the 1 turn bring and lag, the fact that I saved the Drapion and still had a full health Blastoise, I was in a pretty good position there. Tough lead returns in the next match. Shadow Golurk into Virizion. Virizion massively turn waits there before throwing their move. Virizion gonna fire off the Leaf Blade, and now I get to return fire with the Shadow Punch. 2 Shadow Punches plus the Mud Slaps are enough to knock out Virizion. Virizion, again, they are heavily turn waiting before firing off their moves. So I am going to double shield the lead. Things are a little bit uncomfortable because since they are waiting turns, it makes it a lot tougher to catch. But I am going to pause here and then go for the catch. But my opponent, unfortunately, it appears their game actually does update when they wait turns. Which, if I sound a little bitter, I am a little bitter because my game does not update when I wait turns. So I kind of can't anymore. And now I get to send out Drapion. They actually chip it before bringing in Feraligatr, which is definitely preferable for me because I would much rather have them throw the energy at the Drapion than either the Blastoise or the Golurk. So now I get to send out the Blastoise. Blastoise gonna look for a massive farm. Hydro Cannon is going to connect. Looking for a full farm down. Very comfortable tanking a move here, but they survive on 1 HP. They save the energy, and that's a brilliant play by my opponent because that energy will be problematic. I get to KO Virizion. What do they have in the back? They send out a Drifblim, and this is suddenly looking not terrible. I fire off the Hydro, they shield, but I make a misplay. I should have switched instantly into the Golurk, because then I could have made a Shadow Punch before they applied a debuff. But instead, I thought I was 1 off, but I'm 2 off. They're gonna get a debuff applied onto the Golurk, and that now means that this Shadow Punch will not be enough to knock out. So here I can get a farm down with Blastoise, but Blastoise does not win the CMP tie. Well played by my opponent to save that Feraligatr energy as that wins them the game. Maybe if after I got the shield I switched Golurk and instantly, it could have been a different game. Okay, hopping into the final match, and it's a good lead for Shadow Golurk leading into Pangoro. We've seen this a couple times, and it usually works out very well because Pangoro is usually the team's counter to Mudslap, so Mudslap can run absolutely wild in the back. Very comfortable tanking one, shielding one, and then I can look for the Shadow Punch because I know that a Shadow Punch plus a Mudslap will KO from this health range. So Shadow Punch is gonna land, we get the farm down, and now I exit with quite a bit of energy. They're going to bring out Licky Licky, and I'm always going to bait here because the threat of a Dynamic Punch is too much. Now they're forced to throw their energy. I get a catch and a sneak onto the Blastoise, and suddenly things are feeling really nice. I saved a bunch of energy on that Golurk. I'm expecting that if they brought in a rollout user, they don't have a great response to Golurk energy in the back. They are going to go for a Shadow Ball, and I'm going to fire off a Skull Bash. Skull Bash is going to make it slightly harder for my opponent to remove me from the field of play. I get to a Hydro Cannon. I actually don't know if this knocks out or not. So I fire off the Hydro. It doesn't, so I decide to, instead of using Golurk for its energy, use Golurk as a damage sponge on this Shadow Ball. I think about it, I send in Drapion, and it's Skeledirge in the back. I haven't seen very many Skeledirge in Ultra, but this team really likes to see them. If you see Skeledirge, it's basically a free win. I get the world's least important crunch defense drop. Realistically, it's not going to have an impact on the outcome of this game. From here, I'm just seeing if I can get another crunch debuff. Aqua Tail would absolutely KO, but I'm just fishing for debuffs. We actually get a second debuff, which is very funny. I now get to send in the Blastoise. I know that if they bring in the Licky Licky, I will have to throw to deny their energy. So we fire off this move as they make it to 1 HP, denying the Body Slam. And then we can farm down the Skeledirge and take the win. While this team does have its weaknesses, it worked out very well for me today. I wanted to run Blastoise just because I think Blastoise, with its immense amount of bulk and rollout, offers it a solid amount of neutral play. It's going to have matchups where it struggles, like it struggles very heavily into ghost types that resist water. So Jellicent and Giratina are going to be very uncomfortable for it to deal with, but the rest of the team can at the very least hit those for super effective damage. So I don't think it's a perfect team by any means, but it's a team that worked well for me today, probably because I'm just very comfortable with the synergy between Golurk and Drapion and when to overfarm, when to switch out and whatnot. But I really like the team. It produced some pretty nice results, and I'm happy to get veteran this early. And any update that makes Blastoise more viable is something I'm going to be a pretty big fan of. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is genuinely so appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.